There we go. How's it going, everybody? I am here with Nick Dragotta, and this is day 2 of our Banned Book Week Library Livestreams. My name is Matthew Noe. I am a collections outreach librarian at Harvard Medical School, and I work with the ALA Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable of the American Library Association as our Resources and Toolkits Committee Chair. I want to give a special thank you to Image Comics, the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, and ALA for putting on these events throughout the week. So before we dive in with our conversation with Nick here, I want to get a feel for who's in the audience. So first, let us know in the chat if you're a public librarian, maybe you're an educator, a school librarian, maybe you're the odd medical librarian like me or in an academic setting, or a teacher. Just let us know and kind of think about, how you use comics in your daily life as a librarian or educator, or maybe you're just a comics fan and here to hear Nick chat about all of the great work he does. So let us know that too. While you're typing away, for those of you not familiar with the work of Banned Books Week or with the comic book, I always say this incorrectly, the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. I always switch the words around if I'm not careful. But so what are we talking about when we say challenged or banned? Because those both get used interchangeably a lot. Strictly speaking, challenges are the attempt to remove or restrict materials, generally based on an individual or a group's objections to the title, whether it be for age appropriateness or sexual innuendo or contact, or maybe they disagree with the point of view about religion in the book. It could be any of those or more. Banning, on the other hand, is the actual removal of those materials. And so you'll see much more, hear a lot more about challenges to books than banning nowadays, because generally speaking, they get challenged, they go to a library board, support will come in from the community or from the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund will step in, and then the banning won't actually happen. But the challenges are still common today. Some examples of this, most recently, let me find my list here for 2017. So in 2017, every year, the ALA compiles a list of the top challenged books. The Office for Intellectual Freedom in 2017 received 354 challenges to library, school, and university materials. This included 416 books that were challenged or banned in 2017. And of those top 10, number 1 last year was 13 Reasons Why, talking about suicide. I would imagine that this was skyrocketed up because of the Netflix TV show airing. But every year we see comics more and more appearing on these lists. For example, 2017 Drama was on there. And we also had, that might actually be the only comic last year, and plenty of illustrated books as well. So let's look at our poll here, see if people have checked in. And right now, we don't know what any library anyone works in. So if you guys want to keep shouting that out, let us know what kind of library environment you're in, or if you're a teacher, what kind of school you're teaching in. If you're a comics fan, just hanging out to hear what's going on, let us know that too. My second poll question for those of you who come in are if you've ever had a challenge or a ban at their school or your library, and how that worked out. I know a lot of these don't ever actually get reported. ALA only has stats for the ones that actually get reported to the Office for Intellectual Freedom. And you'll usually see these that they get picked up in the news. And lots of the times it sparks conversation on social media. And as we all know with social media, it tends to get a little heated. So a lot of school districts and librarians in general try to avoid that hullabaloo. So while you guys are thinking about that and letting us know, let's hear from Nick. I've been talking the whole time. So we're here with Nick Dragotta. I know you primarily from your work on East of West, but if you want to give a short introduction to who you are, what you've been working on lately, and let us hear.
My name is Nick Dragotta. First of all, thanks, Matt. Thanks for hosting this, and thanks to Image and the libraries putting this together, and the CBL. Yeah. My name's Nick Dragotta. I'm a comic book artist. I've probably done that for, gosh, I guess I got my start around 2003. So maybe 15 years. I've worked at Marvel, DC, you name it. I've probably worked for the company. And my first comic book was actually an educational comic called How Toons, and that was an educational comic that shows kids how to make things using everyday household goods. My first love, though, was always superhero comics. So when I had an opportunity to do that, I went away and did that for a bit, but always kind of was passionate about educational comics and would dip my toe in it and kept How Toons going. My wife joined the team, and she kind of took it over after me. And then after Marvel, I met Jonathan Hickman at Marvel. He's a Marvel Comics writer. And we went over to Image and did our own book called East to West. And that's what I continue to do to this day. So.
For those on the live stream that might not know, can you tell us a little bit about East of West?
Well, it's I guess I would describe it as a science fiction Western, where kind of maybe feels a little bit like our world today, in that the country is very divided, and maybe a little Game of Thrones-ish, and it's just about all these power players, and the four horsemen of the apocalypse are back, and they want to end the world, but one of them falls in love with a mortal and is like, you know what, I kind of like this world after all. So it's got all these kind of mystical, sci-fi, Western kind of things going on. It's fun, it's a fun book. And Jonathan's a fantastic writer, so I really like working with him, and he definitely keeps it interesting.
I don't know if one of the horsemen falling in love was in the original plan, but that would definitely derail the apocalypse a little bit.
That's the crux of our story. That's the conflict, for sure.
Do you know if have you heard of any challenges to the book, keeping it out of readers' hands because of the content, or?
No, I haven't. I mean, I could. There's slight nudity. It's pretty violent, but I haven't heard anything. I don't think it's any different than what kids are getting in video games or, in PG-13 films or anything. It's funny you say that, though. How Toons actually had an issue. My educational comic, specifically designed for like the 8 to 12-year-old. Now, this was stores. It was a Barnes & Noble refused to shelve it in the children's book section because we showed kids how to use a saw, and they deemed that too dangerous. So we were shelved in adult science. Now, I mean, that's different than a public library. A private bookstore can do what they want.
And I don't know that we get, generally speaking, we don't get many reports or stats on those kind of challenges, but it is another way to think about it. What kind of, rather than an outright challenge from a parent or a group, it's a kind of gatekeeping almost, is deciding where this can be shelved.
Yeah.
So it looks like we had a couple, let's see. I'm going to call it current colonel. That's how I'm going to pronounce this person's chat name. They can correct me if I'm wrong. But it says they haven't had any serious challenges, they mentioned, and I'm guessing they're in a public library, because they mentioned a patron was not pleased with our display of romance novels with shirtless men on the cover. I can see that happening. and they say, to be fair, it had been up a long time and needed to be changed anyway. So positive spin there, just needed to change it around. But I'm surprised that I don't hear more about the romance novels getting challenged. Maybe people expect it. So you mentioned your educational comics and some superhero work, but was the educational one your first foray into the comics world? How did you come to comics?
You mean discover it as a reader or as a profession?
As a reader, as a profession, both, either.
Wow. You know, it's interesting. And just doing this chat, I was thinking about like the importance of libraries. I mean, we didn't have comics in our library growing up, but we had these really large illustrated like science fiction art books that I still remember to this day. There was just an aisle of these oversized art books, and the lower half of the shelf was all science fiction. And I used to just sit, and this was the Cape May Public Library in New Jersey. I used to just sit in that aisle and just absorb these books and get lost in this reality these artists were creating. After that, I then discovered the spinner rack at the local bookstore. And it was a great bookstore. It was a really small little bookstore. And they totally encouraged the kids to just sit down and read in the aisles. And I would just flip through all the comics. And back then, it was all licensed stuff. You know, like I loved G.I. Joe and Transformers and things like that. And then as an adult, I kind of got out of comic books. But it wasn't until I started to realize what I wanted to do for a living. And I was like, wow, I want to do something I'm passionate about, and I always love storytelling, and like I really love film, and I was like, you know what, I can draw a little bit. Why don't I give this comic book thing a shot? So I went to art school, and out of art school, you know, I didn't get my first job till I was 28. I graduated art school at 22, so it took a while. Even then, I had to really, you know, nail my butt to a chair, sit down, and practice my drawing. But my art school, I went to Savannah College of Art and Design, and they did a really interesting thing where they would fly editors in from all over the country to do portfolio reviews for students. And at 20, I was still living in this town, Savannah, Georgia. And I was like, you know what, I think I'm good enough. I'm going to, as an alumni, I'm sure they'll let me come in and show my portfolio. And they did. And it was at one of these editors weekends, I met Axel Alonso, who at the time was an editor at Marvel. He had just left Vertigo, and he gave me my first job. So that was like my first inroad into comics. 28, got my first job. I didn't get another job for a few years later because I was that bad.
Oh no, I'm sure that's not the case.
Yeah, but it's the case, Matt. Let's be honest. Like I think that's the thing too. Like if there's anyone out there that's listening to this and is interested in comics as a profession, I highly recommend it. It's amazing, but it takes a lot of dedication to really learning the craft, and it's well worth it too. I mean, it's a great lifestyle. I love it. So.
Yeah, I sometimes So I mentioned being in a medical school, and I'll teach comics as like a reflective tool to people. But I am self-admittedly not an artist. And so we'll use crayons because they're pretty forgiving. And like everyone can draw. That's kind of a Linda Berry kind of idea that everyone can actually draw a story. But breaking into the industry is a whole nother beast altogether.
I totally agree. And crayons are great because they're blunt. You can't get too focused on detail. And like good comics, I don't care like what your level of drawing skill is. It's all about good design. You know, at the end of the day, you can do stick figures and you can say something or write, you know, the words can work perfectly in conjunction with that stick figure to say something profound. And like it's words and pictures working together. So good design first, you know.
Yeah. There's the tweet for anyone on Twitter. Good design first.
So what in medical? What do you do in medical?
So I'm a librarian, but I focus on the humanities and medicine. So like storytelling and patient storytelling and thinking about the whole person kind of thing. And we talk about burnout a lot. So anything that students can do to reflect on their practice and what they're learning and the transformation into this physician who's almost seen as a superhero figure a lot of the times, or a villain, depending on your view. And so they can get that out and onto paper.
Oh, wow. Cool. Have you ever read Monster?
Yeah. Ken doll.
I'm sorry?
Is that you mean the Ken doll one?
No, the manga, Naoki Urasawa's Monster. It's about
no, I should look that one up.
Oh, dude. Go directly to it. Go get Monster. It's one of the best comics ever made. It's
okay.
Excellent. It's about a doctor.
Well, I mentioned gatekeeping, and you were talking about the Barnes & Noble shelving. Do you think that happens more often? Can you see how do you have any thoughts about that being a problem and how comics are? You mentioned growing up that comics weren't really in your library. Why do you think that might
comics weren't that...
Okay.
They weren't really, we didn't have graphic novels. I mean, we're talking early 80s. So,
okay.
I wasn't aware of them. So.
Okay.
In that sense, anyway.
Yeah. So let's dive some heavy question time. So intellectual freedom, creative expression. Why do you think those are important? And in particular, thinking about our current climate and environment, however you want to take current environment and climate, go with it. Why do you think they're particularly important now?
Well, I think because we can learn from other people's point of views, and I think that's most, we can reflect upon our own actions through story. We can learn from, like I said, other people's point of views. Really, I mean, just to educate ourselves. I'm all for freedom of expression and people putting out their ideas out there, challenging those ideas. It's like I read an interesting point of view about a whole thing about fake news. And this author's point of view was that it's kind of good because even if you're reading things that you trust, you should still challenge it and you should still further investigate it. And I think that's a great point of view. Then you're only going to better know your topic and what you're talking about. I think if we see more authors and illustrators come from people that are living these points of view, so more diverse creators, we're going to get to more truth. So I would think that's a good thing.
Hard to argue with any of that. But I think that's probably the idea that we should embrace and actively seek out contrary opinions to our own beliefs is probably the opposite side of a lot of these challenges. It's about sheltering and keeping those viewpoints away. And I think that's where a lot of this comes from. Most of the challenges are geared towards books for small kids.
A lot of it has to do with sexuality. I mean, at least in my small, kind of researching on the topic, and I know I saw this one summer was on the challenge list or ban list, and I think that's one of the best comics I've ever read. As an artist, I'm in awe of the artwork and the presentation. Jillian Tamaki is the artist on that, and it's a fantastic comic. And then I don't understand why it would be challenged or banned because it deals with sex in such a mature way of kids figuring. It's almost like a Stand By Me for girls, and it's excellent. It's an excellent book that I think anyone could learn from and just go on this great little entertaining story that Mariko Tamaki is the writer on that, puts the reader into it. It's just good stuff. I don't I guess the challenge was that it was up for a Caldecott, so that's an art award, and they're normally given to books for younger readers. I think a lot of times too, we can also educate ourselves a little bit more about why these things are challenged or banned, and then also be we understand it, we get it, but it's also a beautiful piece of work, and it could be for this set of readers. It doesn't have to be for 4-year-olds,
Well, yes, of course. It's one of the Rand Flanagan is this library philosopher, if you would say. And one of his 5 laws is that it's every book its reader. Like, every book doesn't have to be for everyone, but every book does have a reader and an audience. It's about getting it into their hands.
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful point. If it's not for you, close the book, put it down.
You mentioned some of the statistics on here. The Office of Intellectual Freedom has they did a collection of statistics from 2000 to 2009 on challenges, and the number 1 cause of challenge was for sexually explicit material. Next after that was offensive language. Then you get down into unsuited to age group, for violence, and for homosexuality explicitly. So that gets...
Yeah, I can't really get with it, because it's like, what country do you think you live in? You know, I mean, just turn on your television. All those things are all over it, and it's how we discuss these things. You can't, like, shelter children from things, and and I guess too, the point is that I think these books that we're talking about also introduce kids to do these subjects in a sensible way. To me, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, like, my 8-year-old loves reading Raina Telgemeier, and I like reading her too. And then I like to discuss it with them. And, you know, they're great examples of comics and what comics can do. And to see them on, like, these banned or challenged book lists is crazy. I mean, the one good thing is that I think it helps sales go up. So good for them on that point. But other than that, it's, you know.
Yeah, I'm shocked every year I see drama or any of Raina's other books wind up on these lists. I'm like, what? How can this be a bad thing?
Yeah, my kid loves Ghosts. Is it Ghosts? He's read that multiple times. He rereads it. He loves it. I mean, so it's great. She's great.
So why do you think maybe comics in particular are winding up on these banned challenge lists so often lately?
Maybe because I, to be honest with you, I don't know, but I would imagine because, like we said, people will deem comics to be for a younger age group, and they think they're still for children. I think we're looking at more readership from girls and like maybe tweens or a little bit of younger reader that's ready for this type of material. It's a visual medium, so the ideas are more immediate. You know, you not have to read through 100 pages to find a line you didn't like. You can open it up. I mean, like, I'm sure Saga, they opened to a page with some nudity, and they were like, that's what this book is, without ever really investigating or reading it. You know, I just think, yeah, it's because it's reaching a really broad range. People define comics now are for everyone, like, and from kids to middle schoolers to adults. So I think the material kind of skews throughout that. And then I think it's a visual medium, so it's more immediate in its ideas.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Saga, because the cover of that alone has the collected edition, the first volume, has caused some issues. I've seen comic shops unwilling to have it faced out because they would get complaints from parents bringing young kids into the store.
That's crazy. I mean, it's like but you still see that stuff on the news too, like a woman asking to be covered up when she's breastfeeding her baby. For people that don't know, the cover to Saga, the hardcover, is a woman breastfeeding a baby. And it's also cropped in such a way that you really gotta, like, it's not super explicit. I mean, it's just, you know, like a baby on a woman's chest, essentially. But, like, you don't see a full-on nipple. I mean, my wife breastfed my baby. We're in the Bay Area. No one really cared. You know, it's just, I don't know. We should talk to my wife about that.
Oh, yeah. So, thinking about banned comics, I think you said you've looked at a few of the lists a little bit. Do you have any of the comics you know that have been banned or challenged that are favorites of yours?
Well, like I said, this one, Summer, is one of my favorites. Bone, I still don't understand why Bone was challenged or banned. I saw that was on the list.
Yeah.
I've read Saga. I like Saga. Fun Home, I like. I think that's kind of it, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with everything that's been challenged or banned, but those are the ones that I've read for sure and that I know of.
So I quick look. Bone was challenged for political viewpoint, racism, and violence.
I didn't get that when I read it.
To me. And I don't. Someone in the chat just said people try to ban Bone because they have no joy in their hearts, and that's that's perfect. Another one that's interesting for me to see on these lists all the time, kind of, it bridges that line between book and comic. Captain Underpants is on these banned lists all the time for unsuited for age group and offensive language.
And my kid loves that too. He loves Captain Underpants. So, wow, I didn't know that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I read that to my kids, so we enjoy it.
I'm just thinking I grew up watching like Ren and Stimpy, and Captain Underpants seems tame by comparison. So
yeah, right.
So I would be remiss if talking to a creator if I didn't ask if you have any favorite library stories or librarian stories.
I was a librarian in art school.
Okay.
I don't have any favorite stories except for I remember like I wanted to work up to be at the front desk because I hated shelving books. You know, and this was back in the day when you had a card catalog and everything wasn't on a computer. But I don't have any funny stories. But I mean, I love libraries. I think they're so important, and especially in terms of like a public place and like what's going on today is just sparking discussion about things that even I in my own industry don't really know much about. You know, so. And it's just I know, like, we take our kids to the library, we check out books. I like getting lost in the library, you know, not everything is on the internet. You know, you want to go for a deeper dive, definitely go to the library. And I just think they're an incredibly important function, and, you know, go libraries.
Well, thanks. So there's a question popped up a little earlier that I think fits. It's a good moment to bring in, and it was given east of west embrace of the Christian apocalypse and biblical figures. What's been the response from Christian readers?
I haven't gotten any. I'm not a very religious person, so that's probably a better question for Jonathan. Because he's always like, hey, Nick, you familiar with this story in the Bible? And I'm like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. So that might be a better question for John, but I've never gotten any response from Christian readers or anything like that. And I guess it's like just our interpretation of these kind of archetypes that are the horsemen. Because I've asked Jonathan, like, I've been like, yeah, what's up with the gods then in this world? Like, where are they at? You know, he's just like, don't think too much on this. Like, just focused on what's at hand. And I think too, as like a creator, I like to not give too much away about the story. Like, I like what readers are going to bring to it. So, you know, like, so if there are Christian readers and they bring in their religion into it, that's great. Awesome. If there's other readers that have a different religion or are not religious, then I'm sure they can be entertained by their you know, and inject their own experiences into it, or however they came up, and it still works, I think, as an entertaining comic and story. At least, you know, that's how it works for me, because I'm not religious and I still am all in on this story and how we're telling it. So
cool. So that brings me thinking back to gatekeeping again, sort of, and beyond just the distribution venue for comics or books, do you ever exercise your own gatekeeping on the stories you're willing to tell, or do you see that having any implications in the industry?
I'm not following your question really.
Okay. I guess maybe the better way to put it is, do you ever self-censor what you're willing to put in your creative work?
Yeah, I think like to a certain degree, but more in the way that I'm questioning myself, like, why am I doing this? Why are you doing this? Is this right for the story?
Okay.
And those are probably just minor character things, you know. But I don't think there's anything where I've like drawn something and been like, I can't show that. I got to put this away. You know, I just no, I don't like. I don't know if I'd call it a gatekeeping of like what I any decisions I've made. It's more of just like, does this make sense and serve the story? And then like, you know, maybe sometimes it's like, what are my motives behind this? But even that like is probably thinking too much on it. You know, a lot of, to be perfectly honest with you, like we're a monthly comic, so. You know, and we're always racing this deadline, and the deadline at the end of the day is the ultimate motivation. I think like in the future though, I'm going to definitely take my time more and probably do a project where I can take my time and have more time and then put it out when it's ready. Rather than us, me and Jonathan are kind of working on this older mold of where, you know, you've got like 6 weeks and you got to get it out, and we do 24 pages a month. So, and we're late, you know, so we're even behind, we're always late. So we're running late trying to catch up. So I think like decision making more is more like design endpoint. Like this might be a better question for Jonathan as a writer. So, you know.
So you mentioned future stories, future projects. Do you have anything coming up that you can share, or any thoughts about where you're going to head next?
I'd like to try and write and draw my own thing. But in terms of sharing what that's going to be, I'm not ready to do that now.
Yeah, totally fine. So reminder for anyone in the audience, if you have questions or thoughts, comments, anything, throw it up in the chat box and I'll read it out here. Let me scroll back up for a moment and see if anyone's got anything. So Image actually wants to know, have you ever illustrated a comic version of a piece of fiction that you read growing up? And if you did get the chance, would you want the comic shelved with other graphic novels or with fiction?
Oh, that's a good question. Man, I have to think about that. Did I ever illustrate anything I read growing up? No, I don't think I have. I mean, like I've redone comics that have been done before when I was at Marvel. But no, no fiction book that I had read that I gotten the chance to illustrate. And would I want those shelved in the graphic novel section or in the fiction section? Why not I personally, I don't mind graphic novel section. So I'll just, you know, when I go to comic shops or bookstores or anything, you know, they shelve their stuff different. I don't really understand what you're asking me there. So like with novels and comics.
Yeah, so I guess the idea is if you illustrated, say, because I know it already exists, I'll use it as an example. If you illustrated Moby Dick or another classic like that, do you have a preference on if that were to be shelved next to Moby Dick, the novel, or should it be in the comics section of a bookstore or library?
Well, they should probably read Melville's book first. I don't know. I'm more of a fan of, like, you know, sure. But if it's for younger readers and they're not ready to read the novel, okay. But like, again, that would probably be them being a younger reader section.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, yeah, why not? But that shouldn't also take away what Melville's doing and reading his book first. I think, you know, like that's an interesting thing. I think that to me they're so different. The experience is so different, and you know, like I can think of, like, wow, what if Mobius illustrated Moby Dick. You know, like, yeah, I'd want to read that. And yeah, that could be shelved next to Melville's book. You know, but like I don't. But for me, no. You can. You don't want to read my Moby Dick. I don't.
It's a very I'll say it's a very librarian kind of question, because a lot that comes up quite a bit in cataloging and deciding where to put things. Should comics be their own section as if they're a medium, like you don't put DVDs next to a book, or should comics be interfiled with books because they're books?
Well, it's interesting. Like, I think it gets to a subjective question too. Like, does it improve upon the original material? Or is it a good gateway for readers to then jump into the original material? You know, so that's.
Yeah, and I may have loaded the deck by using Moby Dick as an example.
But, you know, I do think like, yeah, I think I would shelve it in the graphic novel section, because then you know what you're getting. You're getting an illustrated book, you know. So that's my opinion.
Yeah. That tends to be where I land on it too, but it's an ongoing controversial subject.
That's a good question. Something to think
about. Image would like us to know that this is the second day Moby Dick has come up, and wants to know if it's a whale of a conspiracy. Maybe.
Who's writing these Image comments?
So another question. Let's see. Is there any outlook for bringing readership coming from readers of literature or other media? I'm guessing the other media is thinking along the lines of the cinematic universes.
I think that I think we should push more about. There's a lot of great. I mean, I love Japanese comics probably more so than anything being done in American comics now, just as from a craft standpoint. Like, I love the way they tell their stories and their art, and the way that the story really gets to breathe. And don't get me wrong, I got criticisms too. Like, sometimes it goes on way too long, but most of them are drawn black and white, and the storytelling and the craft of it is just very solid. And I really enjoy those type of comics. So I think too, like, just spreading the awareness of what comics can be, and that, like what we had talked about earlier, like there are comics for everyone. And I think that like creators like myself can kind of we can do our part in helping, like, tell people about like Spike Trotman, who does Iron Circus, she's like a very successful Kickstarter publisher, and she's got a whole line of comics. Zainab Akhtar does a line of comics through Shortbox that she's got this really beautiful sensibility and just exquisite taste for art. Like, as an artist, I get these short boxes in the mail and I'm just like, wow. And it's just like this really point of view from across the world. I think like not all comics are superheroes. So then you have Image comics. And then a point I always stress about Image comics is it's creator owned. There is not a publisher in maybe any industry that operates like Image, in that the creators keep almost all of the profits the book makes. I mean, I can't think, it's incredible. And I just always celebrate that fact. And I'm so thankful to the original creators and to the people at Image, just for how it's changed my life. I mean, like, if you look at the sales chart, East to West isn't blowing away the sales of, a Marvel or a DC book or these books. But, if you can sell like we sell, you'll make a really, really nice living, because we're keeping a majority of the profits. We retain our own rights. So then, if another media comes calling, we get to have those discussions and decide what happens with it. So like, if the public is more educated to like, oh, when I support comics, there's not only just superheroes and, what's transferred in from the movies is one thing, and there's plenty of that, and they're great at it. but there's also all these different voices from all over the world that are making comics. And then there's also companies that are serving the greater good, like Image. So, you know, like I'm always about promoting comics like that. Like, you know, there's some good stuff going on.
Definitely. I have two completely different trains of thought after that, so I'm debating which way to go first. Backtracking a little, I guess, to the manga point, the conversation about manga, Japanese comics. Mm-hmm. I was scrolling through the banned or challenged books list, and I don't actually see any manga on it, which is interesting, and I wonder if you had any reaction to that.
I would think that I guess people just really aren't, the people that ban Booksy or challenge books first, maybe aren't cracking them open, because I definitely think there's a little racier stuff, but that's up to whoever is ordering these books for the particular library should know what they're looking at and ordering. But like, you know, it goes back to, it's just like in America, like, they're racy things, but they're usually like minor nudity and things like that. And then in Japan, I think in their culture, that's a little more accepted. You know, is that what you're getting at? I'm not.
Yeah. No, it's strange that there are a lot of conversations about sales charts, and in comics, manga tend to, some manga series blow away any American comic books in sales. And so they're being read, but they're not necessarily making it on the challenge list, despite some of them having similar themes or similar conversations. So maybe it is just that the people challenging books don't even have manga on the brain as an option.
Yeah, probably not even on the radar.
Yeah.
You know? Like, yeah, I bet you that's part of it. Let's not put it on the radar.
Yeah, let's just pretend that it's not an issue.
But I mean, like, that's the one thing I do love about Japanese comics, is you bring up an interesting point. I was recently rereading a book done in the early 2000s, I think. It's called Gundam Origins, and it's basically essentially like these young kids, teenagers, have to go to war in space, and they fight in these big mechanized robots and stuff. But, you know, and I was thinking, like, man, when I came up, it was like G.I. Joe, and we, like, talked about war, and, like, you know, it was, the violence wasn't real. And in Gundam Origins, it's not, like, very explicit violence. It's not gross or anything, but, like, the kids deal with PTSD, or, you know, there's actually, like, amputees in it. Like, you see, and this was for kids, and it was also a cartoon. So it's like, I think, too, they deal with the realities of the subject matter they're talking about. And it's still meant to sell toys, you know, and it's still meant to go out there and sell a lot of copies. Yeah. So I just thought that was, as I was reading this, I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I really liked the way they handled it. It was all tastefully done. And just Gundam Origins, if anyone's not read that, I wholeheartedly endorse it. I love it.
Yeah. I guess I've been reading a lot of horror manga, Junji Ito kind of stuff, and that's exactly what I'm imagining getting challenged, but I guess maybe libraries aren't buying it to be challenged in the first place, possibly.
Yeah, he's got some good page turns. You know, you see that stuff, and you're like, whoa, oh my God, I didn't see that.
It's nightmares right there.
Yeah.
I guess my other train of thought was to see if you had, I actually am borrowing this question from yesterday's live stream, thinking about East of West in particular, since that's ongoing right now. Do you have any, like, Readalikes, whether comics or other books, that you might suggest to people? Because we get asked all the time, well, I really liked this, what should I read next?
Well, like I just said, Gundam Origins. Yeah. It's like, so I think Game of Thrones is a real big influence on me and Jonathan, and Dune. I love Dune. So I know those are novels. Game of Thrones, the TV show too. But, like, I know we were like, that's what kind of East to West came into this, like, power struggle thing. And Gundam Origins is very much like that. Like, you'll have these these different warring factions, and you're actually rooting for both sides at times. Like you can see, you understand the motivations in both, and kind of East to West feels like that too sometimes. So Gundam Origins is one. Let's see. Like we talked about earlier, Naoki Urasawa, I think, is one of the greatest comic book creators in the world, in that, like, the way he can create suspense on a page. So my favorite of his is 20th Century Boys. Monster is another one that I recommended earlier. Pluto is kind of easy to get into. That was like, it's only 6 volumes. That's why I say that. And it's the retelling of Astro Boy. If you like East to West, I'm a big Tsutomu Nihei fan. I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, but he did comics called Biomega and Blam. And I know Blam is available in large, oversized graphic novels. And I love his work because he does these beautiful, expansive worlds, and there's just a lot of depth. And he draws it looks highly detailed, but it's actually quite simple. So it's like the hardest kind of art to do. You know, like he's making big decisions with few marks, and it's a pretty cool read. Like I love his science fiction and his work. Of course, Akira, but I'm sure everyone's read that. So anything by Tomo. And in terms of, like, I guess in contemporary, I love what Daniel Warren Johnson is doing. He did a book at Image through Skybound called Extremity. He's got a new one coming out. Oh man, I'm gonna flake on the name, but it looks awesome. Let's see, what else is there? I really like, I follow artists, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I could go on and on. Yeah, someone just put Elephant Man in the feed. Yeah, I dig Elephant Man.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, Elephant Man's a good book.
All right. Let's see. For my own curiosity, should we expect a East of West Year 3 deluxe?
Oh yeah, it's ending. After Year 3, it's done. So
okay,
we're on our. I mean, I just finished the last issue. We're like going into our final 6 issues.
Okay.
Yeah, it's almost done. It's all coming to a head. Everything we built up is now just getting destroyed, you know. So.
Let's see. Have you ever had any chances to work with mangaka?
No, I mean, the creators? No.
That's what I'm taking that question as, yeah.
No. They'd leave me in the dust, you know. Japanese comic book artists produce, you know, on average 20 pages a week. They have like a studio full of assistants helping them. Some don't. Gundam Origins creator, Yasuhiko, like Yaz is like his kind of pen name shortened. He did his book. So when you look at Gundam Origins, he did that with no assistants. And that book is like 12 phone books of comics, you know, and I think it was done over a decade, and it's mind-boggling. I mean, and it's beautiful cartooning. It's just amazing. So,
wow. So I'll want to throw out one last call, see if anyone's got any questions. We've got about 10 minutes left on our live cast. I have blown through most of my questions, so please send me some. So you mentioned that manga creators tend to have assistants and help. So what's the general creative process like for you?
Pretty lazy. I mean, I get it. I mean, I've gotten to the point too where, like, so me and Jonathan work in what's called Marvel style. He'll write me a plot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you know, he sends me a PDF that might be anywhere from 2 to some are upwards of 6 pages. And, you know, it'll be like pages 4 through something is this scene. He kind of breaks it down in scenes, and then I can do the page breakdown. I don't know the dialogue. He might give me a line or two, like to give me a sense of what's going on, or if there's a line in his head he knows is going to be in the book. But like I've definitely gotten to the point where I'm like, I know to keep on my schedule, I got to do a page a day. And if I'm falling behind, you know, I might be like, well, how can I get a page a day done today? Well, maybe I'll do a splash page. But like with that said, I'm not going to sacrifice story. So I will put in the work in and pull an all-nighter if I have to here and there. But like like I said, I've been doing this for like 15 years, so I'm kind of pretty comfortable with like I don't fear a page or the work or anything like that.
Got a routine down.
Yeah, kind of. Learning.
Let's see. Someone wants to know when you're coming to LA.
I don't know. When will they have me? I'm right up north here, so.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to be at the Big Adventure Show. That is November 3rd and 4th, I believe. It's this new kind of comic book music comedy show they're doing. And I want to say it's like in Orange County. So it's just south of LA. And there's a whole bunch of rad artists that are going to go to this. And a bunch of cool bands and comedians are going to be there too. So if you like comics, comedy, and comics, go to this thing. I hope I'm not getting the wrong name wrong. I think it's called the Big Adventure Show. So
okay, so the Big Adventure Show in November 3rd
and 4th. I'm sure of the dates. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And do you ever do library visits or library Comic-Con?
Yeah. If you have me, I'll be glad to come out. Through Howtoons, I can't tell you how many schools and libraries I've been to. If you bring me out, I'll talk about, basically what you want. My thing is like, I like to get kids passionate about comics and really preach that all you need is a pencil and paper. And you can pour your imagination out onto the page and, maybe I can give you a few tips on how to get started on that. So I'm more than welcome to do that. Yeah.
So have you ever done, so those are in person. Have you ever done any sort of like this web visits with libraries?
Yeah, this is my first web foray. I'm skeptical. I'm not a big fan of the internet. I'm not comfortable knowing like where this video is going to be online and out there forever. I don't know. This is like our pictures are going to show up somewhere with people photoshopping them and stuff.
That's Don't anybody do that. And I think this question is getting answered in the chat because it was for Image. Asking about the funding mechanism, if Image would ever do crowdfunded books, or if that's not their style.
I think that's up to the creators. I mean, my experience at Image is that's the beauty of it. You can promote, you can fund, you can do your book anyway. The big thing, I think a big misconception is Image basically advances you the money, and they'll take the hit. If your book doesn't sell, they take the hit. And when your book makes money, you first pay back Image what you owe. It's a very small fee, but it's basically the pre-production and post-production and, fees for Diamond, the distributor, and printing and things like that. But like I know of people that have crowdfunded their book and then Image has picked it up.
Yeah. But Bingo Love was the example of that in the chat for those who didn't see.
Bingo Love, yeah, I guess that's being published through Image. So like Image, you can crowdfund and then get distribution through Image. It's all gravy at that point too. If you've already paid for the creation of the book.
So you mentioned that you guys do, you and Jonathan Hickman write Marvel style. Could you explain a little what the editorial process looks like for you guys?
There is none.
Oh no.
There is none. There's no, and that's another beautiful thing about Image. We don't, it's just basically me, Jonathan, Frank Martin, who is the world-class colorist, and our world-class letterer, Russ Wooten. If there's any like editing in terms of spell check and things like that, that gets done at Image. So thank you to Image. And then we got Drew in production helping us put it all together and send it to print. So Image has a great team in terms of like how they'll promote the book, set things up like this, so they'll help promote Image or East to West or like this kind of way. But no, there's no one telling me and Jonathan what to do. Like, I love editors. I love good editors too. So, like, it's not like I don't want an editor on the book. We just don't have one. You know, we kind of fly by the seat of the pants, and just go with what we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any last words that you want to throw out there, Nick?
Well, I mean, thanks for doing this, Matt. I appreciate it. And this is a good little Q&A. It was fun. And I want to encourage everyone to go to their library and read some comic books, no matter where they're shelved.
Definitely. So I'll just close this out here. If you are a librarian or a teacher or anyone really that sees a challenge happening or a ban happening to a book, you can report that challenge to ALA's Office of Intellectual Freedom. They provide confidential support to anyone undergoing a challenge or a ban. Support can come in the form of letters or book reviews, resources, talking points, or even emotional support, which, if you're being challenged by a large group, may actually be more necessary than you think. You can report censorship online. Hopefully, this link can get posted in the chat, but I'll read it out. It's at ala.org/tools/challenge support/report. Or you can call them at 1-800-545-2433, extension 4226. And you can also find all manner of support and resources from the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, CBLDF. If you're like me, you're going to mispronounce it 90% of the time unless it's right in front of you. But they do great work. And you can find out about managing challenges from them at cbldf.org/managing-challenges. So hopefully no one ever needs those resources, but they're there if you should need them. And one last thanks out to Image and CBLDF for sponsoring us and for the ALA's new Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable. If you're an ALA member, please join us. We're great, and we can help you out with all sorts of comic stuff. And thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Everything Matt just said, wholeheartedly agree. Thank you.
Thanks.